Welcome to my tutorial on how to create a Notion time tracker template. In the tutorial, I will show you how to use database buttons to log the time you spend on various tasks. This is how the finished solution works. I have a database of tasks I'm recording time against, and I can stop and start recording time using the work and pause buttons here. As you can see, I have 2 completed tasks with the time already recorded against them, and 1 task where time is currently being recorded. So if I open up the right blog task, you can see all the timesheets recorded against the task, and the top one is the most recent timesheet where time is currently still being logged. When I click on the pause button, time recording is stopped for this task by giving the timesheet an end date. So next I'll add new tasks, so meeting with client, and the status is automatically set to not started. When I click on the work button, time starts being recorded against the task and the status changes to recording. I'll open up the record so you can see the timesheet that has been added. I'll also assign this task to a project. This is optional but means you can track total time spent on all tasks for each project. I'll show you by going into the projects database and seeing the total time spent. Clicking on the record, you can see all the associated tasks. This tutorial is a step-by-step walkthrough of how to create this template. But if you're pressed for time and prefer not to build this template from scratch, you can purchase it. The link is available in the video description below. Let's create the template. Start off by creating 2 inline databases on a blank Notion page. Name the first one tasks and the second timesheets. First, I always remove the default tag properties that Notion automatically creates in the database. Then in the task database, add a new relation property, and this should link to the timesheet database. Make sure you turn on the option show on timesheet, then add the relation. So you can see that the relation property has been added to both databases. Next, on the timesheets database, create 2 date properties. Label them start and end. These will be used to log the duration you work on each task. So now let's add the first button. In the tasks database, create a new button property, name it work or any name you prefer, choose an icon and add a label. I always use emojis in my buttons to make it more visually appealing. This button will add a new page to the timesheets database with the time you click the button recorded in the start property. To do this, click Add an Action, choose Add Pages To, select the timesheets database. For the start property, set the value to now. This records the exact time and date you clicked the button. Crucially, you'll also want to link this template entry back to the task record. So to do this, click Edit Another Property, select the Tasks Relation property and set it to this page. This links the new timesheet record with the task that you're in. Before we test this, I'll populate some task names in the task database and clear any blank timesheet entries to tidy things up. Now let's test. I'll click the work button for task 1 and watch as a new timesheet record pops up, marked with the start date and time and linked directly to task 1. Next, let's set up the pause button in the tasks database. So add a new button property and name it pause. Choose an icon for the button and add a label. This button will be used to edit pages within the timesheets database, specifically targeting those entries that are still active, i.e. the ones that don't have an end date. To do this, click on Add an Action and select Edit Pages In. So we want to edit pages in the timesheets database, And we want to ensure that we're not editing all timesheet records, so click on All Pages to open the Filter dialog box. Set a filter on the end property with the condition is empty. This will target all timesheets that are still running. Ideally, we'll be able to only pause timesheets related to the current task, but Notion doesn't support this level of filtering directly through the button actions. For now, this button will pause all active timesheets. To do this, click Edit a Property, select the End property and set its value to Now. This action records the exact time and date when the pause button is clicked. So let's test the pause button. When you click it, see how the end date and time are set to Now for all active timesheets. I'll test the buttons for the other tasks too, even starting 2 tasks at once to see how the pause button stops both. In the next segment, we're going to calculate the total time spent on each timesheet entry and the total time for each task. If you prefer not to type out each formula, you can simply copy and paste them from my blog, and you'll find the link in the video description below. First, let's add a formula property to the timesheet database to calculate the time in minutes for each record. So create a formula property and name it time brackets minutes. So start by creating a basic if formula. If the end property is empty, I want to set the value to say empty, otherwise it will say not empty. And we'll check to make sure this initial logic is correct. It should display empty for ongoing tasks and not empty for completed ones. So this looks okay, so I'll add to the formula. So for records where the end property is empty, I use the date between function to calculate the time between now and the start time, and we want that time in minutes. For records with an end date, again use the date between function to calculate the time between the end and start properties, and we also want this displayed in minutes. Now we have a formula that tracks the amount of time spent on each task. Next, we'll create a property in the task database to calculate the total time spent on each task. So add a formula property in the task database and name it time minutes. In the formula, use the map function, and for the first argument, select the relation property that links to the timesheet database. For the second part of the map function, get the time minutes property that we've just created using the current.time minutes. You can select it from the list. Click Done, and you can see the formula creates a list of all the timesheets recorded against each task. But we don't want to list, we want to sum these up. So let's go back into the formula and add the sum function to the end of the formula. This sums up all the timesheet minutes to calculate the total time spent on each task. Click Done again. Now the property displays the total time for each task. The next step is to make this time data more user-friendly by converting the minutes into hours and minutes. So in the task database, add a new formula property, calling it total time. The first part of the formula rounds the total minutes down to the nearest hour. We use the floor function for this calculation. And the second part calculates the remaining minutes. It subtracts the hours from the total minutes to get this remainder. Remember, you can copy and paste these formulas from my blog, and the link is below. Next, I want to add the same property to the timesheet database. We can do that by simply copying the formula we've just created, and in a new property in the timesheet database, we can paste in this formula. And it should work like this. The next step is to add a completed button to the tasks database, so you can automatically set the end date of a task. Add a date property to the task database and name it end date. Then we want to add a button property to the tasks database. Name it completed and add an icon, and give the button a label. This button will give the task an end date when clicked. So simply click on Add an Action, Edit Pages in, and then select this page as the database. Select the end date property and set the value to today. Now let's test that this button is working as expected. And you can see that when I click the completed button, this task is given an end date. At the moment, you don't know if you're recording time against a task unless you look at the timesheet and see which records are running. The next step will add a status property that works out if you're recording time against a task, have pause time, or if the task is completed. It'll even give you some warning messages. To do this, add a new formula property to the tasks database and name the property timesheet status. This is a long formula, so you can pause the video here and write it out or copy from my blog. The formula is looking at all the timesheets linked to a task and working out if the task is recording time, has completed recording time, or if it doesn't have any timesheets at all. It also has a few warning messages if you set the task as completed but still have an open timesheet or have more than one open timesheet recording for the task. And you can see here that these 3 tasks have been given different timesheet statuses. Here's an optional property you can add. It displays the start date of the first timesheet recorded against a task, so you can easily see when you started working on it. To do this, add a new formula property, naming it start date. Again, we're using the map function to get the list of timesheets associated to the task. It uses the sort function to order them and then returns the first start date value. Finally, you can set the template up to link to a projects database, where you can total all tasks related to each project. This could be useful if you invoice your work by hours. To do this, add another inline database to the page and call it projects. I'll add in some project names and delete the tags property first. And to this database, you want to add a relation property linked to the tasks database and make sure you click on Show on Tasks. You can now go to the tasks database and select which project each task is related to. Not all tasks need to have a project. In the projects database, we now want to sum up all the time taken on that project. First, add a new formula property, calling it time brackets minutes. And again, we'll use the map function for this. So this function gets the tasks relation and all the times related to this project, which it sums up. Then we need to add a total time property, and this uses exactly the same formula as we used in the task database to convert the time in minutes to hours and minutes. Now let's go down to the timesheet database and make some of these time recordings longer so you can properly see how it would look in the projects database. And you can see that projects 1 and 2 have time recorded against them. And that's the template completed. You can tidy up, hide properties, put database in toggle lists, add icons, etc. So it can look a bit more like my finished template here. So you can see I've hidden the databases in a toggle list, and I've also linked all the timesheets associated to each task in the body of the record, so you can go and see the timesheets associated to each task.